On today's bonus episode, I talk through an article written by Cupp which laments Elon Musk's takeover of Twitter because she doesn't want him to govern how you speak. This is Cringe Posts. Hello friends, welcome to this episode of the Cringe Posts podcast. We've got a bonus episode here for you today because Britt is out, so you're just riding with me today. But we are going to be reviewing an article by Cupp for New York Daily News about Elon Musk acquiring Twitter, which of course was the breaking news of this week. Before we get started, just want to remind you to like and share and comment and subscribe. All that good stuff helps us out and we appreciate it. I'm going to go ahead and link this article in the page on the YouTube channel, and we'll also have a link elsewhere for you to nab if you want to read this for yourself. But the title of this article from Cupp is "Who Does Twitter Owner Elon Musk Think He Is?" His own tweet suggests he's in no position to govern others' behavior. Now, this is written again by Cupp, who is a journalist. She's had shows on multiple platforms. I know notably she had Cupp Unfiltered on CNN. And for, as much as I'm going to sort of lay into this article, I will say that she did host interesting guests on that show and panelists a lot. I always appreciated that. I know she had Dave Smith on multiple times. She had Andrew Levy, I believe, was the co-host of that, which was always fun. I think she may have even had some other good people on there who I like that I doesn't come to mind right now. It's been off the air for a little bit, and it's been a while since I've seen it. But I always appreciated that. She is a sort of moderate, mainstream neocon, warhawk Republican type. So you would expect her to be on the conservative side of things. I think she was sort of CNN's token conservative in many ways. But when we come to thinking about it, it's not really right and left anymore so much as it is freedom versus tyranny. And I find that most journalists and corporate media outlets tend to be more on that tyranny side of things. And I think you'll see that shine through this article. So even in the title here, we've got, "Who does Twitter owner Elon Musk think he is?" His own tweets suggest he's in no position to govern others' behavior, which is a really interesting way to phrase an acquisition of a company like Twitter, when his whole purported goal is to restore free speech. Now, if this was an article condemning the current CEO who had just taken over from Jack Dorsey and has been on the record as saying that Twitter is a better company for policing people's speech and making sure that it's a platform that guides what people can and can't say, then maybe she would have a point. But when Elon Musk is trying to restore Twitter to being more of an open space for people to speak freely, you kind of have to question what the point of this article title is, using the word govern. It's kind of interesting. So let's start the article, and we will sort of make comments along the way here. So the article starts, "Like everything else in today's era of total partisan absolutism, the news that billionaire tech magnate Elon Musk bought Twitter landed like a giant sledgehammer, cleaving the country in two. Depending on one's politics, the sound made by the hostile takeover was either the death knell of truth and civility or the symphonic rhapsody of free speech for all. On one side, actress Jamila Jamil was representative of the opposition, tweeting one final dystopian thought before vowing to quit the social media outlet. I fear this free speech bid is going to help this hell platform reach its final form of totally lawless hate, bigotry, and misogyny. Best of luck." Meanwhile, over on the right, Tucker Carlson was in the throes of post-coital bliss. Elon Musk's purchase of Twitter is the single biggest political development since Donald Trump's election more than 5 years ago. It's the most threatening challenge to the corrupt and incompetent leadership of this country. End quote. Now, it should be said at the outset that most Americans are not on Twitter, don't care about Twitter, and will not be affected by Musk's purchase of Twitter. Even on Twitter, influence is wielded by a minority of highly active users. According to a 2021 survey, 25% of Twitter users in the US produce around 97% of all tweets. Now, before I continue in this article, I do want to say that I don't think she's necessarily wrong about the hyper-sensationalism. I think the impact that this will have, I do think it will be it's a good thing, and I think it's a big step, but I don't think Elon Musk's takeover is necessarily going to be the one solution for all of the various problems that exist regarding free speech or regarding corporate media control or government narratives or anything like that. I do think it is a good thing, and I do think it's something worth noting. I do think it's something worth celebrating. And again, I don't even think Elon Musk himself is this perfect beacon of untarnished principle, but I think someone who's at least definitively declared themselves on the right side of the principle of free speech, taking such a massive push into the culture is a big deal, because people with principles supporting things like free speech often retreat from the culture, often retreat because they're afraid of getting attacked. That's why the conservative movement really has not conserved much of anything, as we point out many times on this show. Now, let's see here. Let's continue the article. I think let's go there. Okay. But the far right and the far left would still have you believe the new owner of this social media site will be directly responsible for the fate of free speech in America. Dispatching with the melodrama of both positions, it's important to point out there's a lot we don't know yet. For starters, who will be the site's new CEO? Who will Musk appoint to its board? Will he allow Trump back on after his 2021 permanent suspension? Trump, who's promoting his own platform, suggests he doesn't want to get back on Twitter. With the answers to those and other questions still unknown, the hyperventilating in both directions seems wholly premature. What we do know is that Musk views his takeover of Twitter as nothing short of, quote, extremely important to the future of civilization, end quote. But just because he believes that doesn't mean we have to. Musk is not unique in his inflated sense of self and inability to see his own flaws. He's firmly in the category of solutionists, successful, ego-driven billionaires who believe they can solve any problem, even the most complex, by merely gracing it with their presence. To them, success in one arena, and lots of money, of course, means they are somehow uniquely qualified to, say, run a news company, be the president of the United States, or determine the fate of the free speech of millions of people. I want to take a break there and say, it's funny that she's making this critique about people coming in and saying they can solve this problem, they can, determine the fate of free speech for millions of people. When she's a corporate journalist, they are the ones who for years were dictating what people did and didn't hear when it came to news and when it came to political views and opinions. They gatekeeped the acceptable opinions of what you can say, what political discourse would get you canceled. They've lied us into war. They've done all kinds of awful things. And yet now she's sort of poo-pooing the idea that, ego-driven billionaires can solve these problems as if it's an external problem. Well, I hate to break it to you, but the owners of CNN, the owners of New York, Times and others, they are billionaires. And Jeff Bezos bought the Washington Post. So it feels a little bit hypocritical for her to be coming in and criticizing someone joining this arena of at least competing ideological talks, and saying, "Oh, like he's not going to fix anything. They're not going to do like." And I don't even know that Musk himself would say that he can completely save it. But as a businessman, why would you ever want to downplay your own success? Obviously, you want to play up what you can do. You want to sell yourself. You want to make people excited to come to your product and your platform. I think that's a very silly and sort of vapid critique. So you can already see the sort of the seeds being sown of this distaste for alternate platforms. And note that she's downplaying the role of free speech, and I think you'll see that a little bit later as well, where she's kind of downplaying how much this will impact free speech. She's saying that, the impact is still unknown, and she continues here, and I'll highlight this in a second. So continuing, she says, but businessman turned Mayor Mike Bloomberg couldn't solve obesity by trying to ban big gulps. Neither Tom Steyer nor Howard Schultz could turn their business acumen into winning presidential campaigns. Trump approached running the country like running one of his failed companies and nearly broke democracy in the process. Okay, so that's really, really funny that she's or let me once more continue. Musk's ambitions for Twitter and free speech are not at all indicative of what he'll actually be able to do. Okay, so there's a couple things I want to point out here. So she's downplaying this impact of free speech. Earlier she says that Musk claims it's going to be nothing short of extremely important to the future of civilization, but we don't have to believe that. But then she's literally giving him the sort of benefit of saying that will he be able to impact free speech in this way? So she on the one hand downplays Twitter as a mechanism of free speech and then calls it the mechanism of free speech later. She has this self-refuting line in this article where she's posturing the start when she wants to dismiss Musk, saying he's not really going to be able to impact the nation. Only the top percentage of Twitter accounts matter. So it's not really free speech in that sense. It's not a good champion or cause to champion. She's trying to downplay how much it actually is representative of free speech. But then when it comes to can he fix it, can he solve it, can we determine the fate of free speech for millions of people? She's saying that Musk determines the fate or doesn't determine the fate of millions of free people via Twitter. So she wants to sort of have her cake and eat it too, say it's not really free speech when you want to downplay the importance of it and say that Twitter's not that important, which is something that a corporate journalist may do. But also wants to say that it is free speech when you're trying to worry about the danger of some big person coming in there and taking over. One other thing that's really funny is when she talks about the businessmen turned, trying to solve these political issues, she brings up Mike Bloomberg, Tom Steyer, Howard Schultz, and then lumps them in with Donald Trump. So yeah, you can give these examples of big businesses, or big individuals, billionaires, and magnates trying to fix these individual issues through private means and not being able to do it. But all of these examples, yeah, literally all of these examples are people taking over or enacting policies on the political level. So you talk about Trump approached running the country like one of his failed companies and nearly broke democracy in the process. Goofy hyperbole there, but it's so funny. All of these have to do with government action. It's all these business people trying to come in and take control and do things through the power of government. She can't point to say, for instance, Jeff Bezos thought he could solve, the problem of remote access to cheap goods, but he totally did through creating Amazon and making, 2-day shipping like a reality for millions. Like, all of these private ventures that are successful and driven by these people who are successful and they have got business acumen and have built up these institutions. They solve problems. That's what the private market does. The government, however, every time it tries to force people into the correct behavior has unintended consequences. So all of her examples here are talking about business people, rich, powerful individuals trying to do things through government and failing. So it's really funny then that she's trying to lump Musk in, who's doing this as an entirely private means. It's a private company, as we were gleefully told when Twitter was banning people who spoke outside the acceptable political discourse. Okay, but now we're getting to sort of the meat of this article here, where she talks about sort of why she doesn't think Musk is fit to run Twitter. We can, however, judge him by his actions on the very platform he now wholly owns. And Elon Musk was absolutely terrible on Twitter. Revisiting just a few of his worst episodes, there was the time he used Twitter to threaten labor organizers at Tesla. The National Labor Relations Board ordered Musk to delete the tweet and reinstate a fired employee who was a union supporter. Okay, so you're like, wow, that doesn't sound very good, right? And again, I'm not going to defend everything Musk has done. I think that Musk is an imperfect person, and I think he's probably tweeted some bad things. But let's look at this individual one. So he threatened labor organizations. What happened was let me pull up the exact tweet here. So there was a labor organization movement that was trying to get people to unionize at Tesla, and Elon Musk fired the head union activist, which, I mean, I don't think it's a great look, but I also think that a business should be able to fire its employees for any reason, to be perfectly honest. Freedom of association means that if you don't want someone working for you and you have a contract with them and the contract says that you can remove them, then that's what it means. Now, again, legally speaking, maybe this was wrong and things like that, and that's not great. But firing an employee like that actually has nothing to do with how he would run Twitter, because a private company is different than the free speech platform that Twitter is supposed to be. So for one, either it's okay that Twitter is a private company and he can do what he wants, and you may disagree with how it's run, but then you can't simultaneously claim that Twitter is the public square for free speech. Again, here's this contradiction that S.E. Cupp gets into, where she, on the one hand, wants to say that, look, he fired an employee at his private company for speaking out, and how can that be someone who supports free speech? Well, how he runs his private company is different. So than how you might want to support a public space, as people call Twitter all the time. They call it the public square, the modern public square. So if Twitter is the modern public square, as she claims it is, and that it's a problem, then how he runs his private company is entirely different. But he's now made Twitter a private company, so that complaint doesn't really work. Now, you may disagree and say that, well, now that he owns both and now they're both private companies, he's going to silence people like that. And that might be true, but if you're making that claim, you're jumping into that hyper sensationalism that you just decried earlier in the article, because you actually have no indication that he will do that other than his past actions. But he's never declared Tesla to be a place of free speech, whereas he's actively said that he wants to make Twitter a beacon of free speech. So the only thing that you have to go on are his past actions with something that he has definitively declared as a different beast, which is not a lot to go on. So it seems to me like she's buying into this hyperbole. But let's go to that tweet, because, threatening labor orgs sounds kind of bad. Here's the tweet. Let me know if you think that this is a threat. Nothing stopping Tesla team at our car plant from voting union. Could do so tomorrow if they wanted. But why pay union dues and give up stock options for nothing? So if you really wanted to take that as a threat, which apparently the National Labor Relations Board did, which is just crazy to me, I guess you can take that as a threat. To me, that seems more like there are trade-offs and there are costs. Just as if you're freely going to associate with a union, I freely am going to, change the dynamics of our contractual working relationship. In the same way that it's like, if I hire someone to come into my office to clean, and then they make a lifestyle choice where they're, smoking cigarettes now, I should be able to change my policy to say, hey, you know what? My office, I don't want that smoke smell to come in here. You don't get to smoke on my property. And if you come in smelling like smoke, I'm going to have to ask you to leave and come back when you don't smell that way. When there are these changes in how you associate or how you're represented, those things have big implications. And so to act like it's a threat is very weird when he's just saying, there's costs and there's benefits. There's exchanges of, opportunity costs, and you can join a union, but why give up stock options for nothing? That kind of thing. So again, seeing it as a threat is terrible. And so just say, she doesn't link the actual tweet. She links an article about it, but she doesn't actually put the tweet in here because I think it sounds kind of pathetic. And again, he had to reinstate that employee. That's a legal thing. So again, when it comes to the law, probably wasn't the best thing, but ultimately on principle, I think anyone should be able to associate with who they want and not associate with who they don't want to. So I don't really see that being any real connection to free speech or Twitter or anything like that. Okay. The next thing. There was the time he was sued by Vernon Unsworth, a member of a group that rescued a Thai boys soccer team trapped in a cave in 2018. Musk called him a pedo guy on Twitter. Unsworth unsuccessfully sued for defamation. Musk's defense was, people say a lot of things on Twitter that aren't true. So yeah, I don't love this one, right? I can see him acting out and calling him a pedo guy, and it was unfounded and it was not great. I get it. But the idea that somehow demonstrates that he shouldn't be in charge of Twitter, I guess to me, you just don't like the idea of free speech then. You don't like the idea that people can say things that they want to, and they can act out in silly ways and goofy ways. Now, the irony of this is if it's defamation, I think, if anything, Elon Musk came out looking way worse. In the court of public opinion, no one walked away from that thinking that this Vernon Unsworth guy was a pedo, and everyone looked away thinking that Musk looked childish. So in that way, he said something in poor taste, and he paid the price. He had to deal with the consequences of everyone jumping on him and saying, "What are you talking about?" And so, I don't know. This to me doesn't give you that much ground other than to say, yeah, he's not a perfect dude. And it's like, sure. But notice that she would rather Twitter be responsible to monitor the content of individuals than individuals be responsible for that content. Because I get, if you're thinking about this, if she's using this as an example of why he shouldn't be in charge of Twitter, and he's said that he wants Twitter to allow free speech, the only conclusion I can come to is that she would want someone to be in charge who would disallow that kind of tweet, who would suspend an account for that kind of tweet. And so she would rather Twitter be a platform that takes responsibility away from users. And to me, I would rather Twitter err on the side of free speech. Again, so we're in this place where she's complaining about free speech in the public square and saying how Elon Musk can't govern what you can and can't say. But even the most, heinous example given so far of the two is that he said something bad, therefore will probably be more likely to allow bad things to be said, rather than governing what you can or can't, governing what you can't say, I suppose. So I'm confused by the point of her article here. If she's talking about, Elon Musk not being able to govern your behavior when he himself has had bad behavior, but he's never made the claim to want to govern your behavior. If anything, he's wanted to make things more transparent and open source. Okay, let's continue with the article. There was the degrading and sexist joke he made on the platform that he was starting a new university, Texas Institute of Technology and Science, or TITS, which, spells out a lewd thing. It was not a great look for a tech boss in an industry rife with sexism and misogyny. Okay, so yeah, it's a stupid joke. I don't like it. But we let Robert Reich on this platform, and he spews blatant lies and contradictions all the time about things that have an actual impact. We let news outlets and journalists on who misreport things all the time lie us into war. Why on earth is this, again, an example in this saying why Elon Musk shouldn't own Twitter? Yeah, he made a stupid, bad taste joke. This highlights the importance that some of these things have in journalists' minds. Like, I get that it's not a good look, and I get that it might be a little sexist. I kind of struggle to think maybe it's just a bad joke, and I get how if you were a woman you might be more offended at it, and I'm more just sort of annoyed and disgusted by it. But to me that has no bearing on his ability to run Twitter as a platform, other than, again, that yeah, he's gonna let bad jokes on the platform. There's so many worse things on corporate media that has been allowed. I mean, for heaven's sakes, we had a whole interview with, Jeffrey Toobin of CNN talking about the time that he was on a Zoom call with his, with his staff coworkers, and he did some very inappropriate behavior, and they asked him about this. I mean, like, I don't know. If we're talking about inappropriate content being put out, yeah, this is a bad joke. But corporate media is so much worse, and I've not seen you trying to hold them accountable for this kind of thing that often. I don't know. Again, it's not really the strongest defense from me, but it's also not the strongest point from her. So to me, it's kind of a wash here. Like, okay, he made a bad joke. Let's move on. Next point, he used the platform to mock fears over COVID-19. Okay, this one's really good. So the tweet in question here is on, I believe it was March 6th, he tweeted, of 2020, he tweeted, "The coronavirus panic is dumb." Wow, that is truly harmful behavior. Wow, it's almost like dissenting voices about COVID were silenced, they were muted, our own channel on YouTube got a strike for citing news or citing studies that were being publicized by news outlets. We weren't even citing dissenting opinions. We were citing the ones that were being propagated, and we still got a strike because it went against the narrative. And you think about people like the journalist Alex Berenson, who was putting out the best data showing how all the COVID responses were not doing anything, how different places were in comparison, how these policies were ineffective, how there was no rhyme or reason, and he got silenced for going against the narrative. So the only thing that you've shown me here is that Elon Musk will probably allow dissenting voices on important crucial issues. And important crucial issues like coronavirus are the exact kinds of issues that we need dissenting voices on, because they're too important to only have monolithic thinking on. If the coronavirus was as deadly as it was, as we've often said, if it was as deadly as they said it was, you wouldn't have to convince people in this by silencing the dissenters. I think that's why, for instance, the anti-vax movement, the true original anti-vax movement was so small before, because while there were people who didn't want to get vaccinated, and there were these, I don't even mean to say this in a diminishing way, but fringe movements, it never gained a lot of traction because by and large, the majority of the population was okay with vaccines. They found them safe. They found them fine. They didn't see these negative repercussions. And so they were widely, accepted. And so now that you've redefined anti-vaxxer to mean anyone who has any sort of, I don't personally want to get vaxxed, or I don't want people to force to get vaxxed with this new, relatively untested vaccine. It's I guess my larger point here is that him mocking COVID-19 indicates to me that you will allow dissent on the important issues. You won't ban people for saying things that aren't popular. And that to me is a great thing and the exact point of free speech. So I think her putting that in there weakens her case by a lot. She continues. And he used Twitter to make false statements about his own company. One of those false tweets resulted in a $40 million settlement with the SEC, Musk and Tesla paying a $40 million penalty, and Musk stepping down as chairman. Okay, so he said something about, he was going to sell his shares at $420 and that it was all lined up and it was untrue, and they nailed him for it. Again, a bad tweet and had some repercussions. But once again, this is something that has very little to do with Twitter. If he'd wanted to make that announcement on any other place, he could have. I think for people to see Twitter and to see a meme stock like that, and it manipulates the market and yada yada. But there's so much regulation in this area too, where I think in order to make a joke or in order to say things like that to cause people to act in certain ways, like people are in charge of their own actions and how they interpret data. So Elon Musk making a joke like that and saying all these things, was it a lie? Was it a scam or corporate greed of some kind? It's possible. It totally is. But I think that if he was really intent on making some sort of scheme like this, he could have also went to the news outlets and reported the exact same thing. And I think when it comes to this, you as an individual should be gauging where someone is speaking from, how they're speaking. You should be using your own judgment. So if the stock price changed based on that, I think the people who bought or sold based on it, they should probably still be somewhat responsible. Now, the extent to which, this was made in sort of a legally binding way, is questionable, but the bottom line to me is, let's assume the worst here. It has nothing to do with Twitter. Even if it was a false statement that was completely wrong and immoral, he could have done it in any other platform. It has nothing to do with Twitter. So, yeah, he used Twitter to make a statement like that. That doesn't have anything to do with how he runs Twitter. So I don't really see how this connects. To me, it seems like it's just guilt by association. Since he used Twitter, that means he's unfit to run Twitter, which I don't think that really adds up when you put it under the spotlight there. Okay, let's finish this up. All of that makes it clear that if Musk is to be the new arbiter of free speech, accountability, and responsibility on Twitter, his first move as the new owner should be to ban himself from the platform. He couldn't govern his own behavior on the platform. There's absolutely no reason to trust him to govern yours. Okay, but that's the point, SE Cupp, is that he's into unbanning, exposing, and making things transparent. He's showing how the platform works. He's trying to enable dissenting opinions. He's not trying to govern people's behavior. That's the exact opposite of what he's trying to do. Sure, there will still be some basic enforcements, but you're not going from no enforcement to some enforcement based on Twitter. You're going from a draconian, silencing dissent voice sort of tyranny of what Twitter has been to someone who has said, I want to bring back free speech. So if your complaint is that he's going to govern in a way you don't like, that's fine. But you have to acknowledge that he's not trying to overly govern your behavior any more than the current overlords are at Twitter. It's a weird thing to say, to me, it's similar to when Republicans get mad at when a Democrat president comes in and starts spending out the wazoo, because it's like, yeah, you should be mad about that, I suppose, but you might want to look at the last Republican administration, which set records on spending and deficit spending and debt addition. People are mad about Joe Biden with the inflation, and it's like, but it's Donald Trump who's the one who signed the bills that printed all this money, and Biden's day is coming too. So if she's mad about Elon Musk governing people's behavior, one, that's also speculative. She's buying into the hyperbole she denounced from the beginning. Two, she talks about how he's supposed to be the new arbiter of free speech after saying that it wasn't free speech because it's only the top 25% of Twitter accounts that do 97% of tweets and stuff. So again, she's inherently contradiction on what Twitter is or is not. And then lastly, she says he shouldn't govern, but all he's ever done is express an interest to free people and to let people speak more, which I think is somewhat the opposite of governing. And I don't know. It seems to me that she sort of gives away the game about how they view corporate news and the platforms that they run as a means of control and of governing how people think and feel, because she can only relate to Elon Musk taking over Twitter in terms of him controlling the people on his platform, when numerous times he's expressed the complete opposite. He's wanted to unban people. He's wanted to let his haters speak out on the platform. He doesn't want to silence dissent. But she can only interpret it as him governing your tweets and your behavior. So I guess the last thing I will remark on this is that Twitter is a benefit to people who don't already have another platform. So people like her, people like Elon, even people like Trump who's been banned from Twitter. They can get their voices heard. They have networks. They have abilities to get on the cable news. They have the abilities to make waves through their actions. They can get their messages out there. The people who don't have the ability once they've been banned or silenced are the smaller people, the dissenting voices, the non-traditional actors in this space. They're the ones who benefit the most from having a free and open Twitter. And that is scary to a corporate media who works on controlling the narrative, controlling what is and isn't allowable in the public discourse. So to me, when you're talking about this, you're talking about how Elon Musk taking over he's done all these somewhat unrelated, terrible things, and therefore he shouldn't be allowed to let dissenting voices back on. You're just highlighting that you don't want smaller people to be able to compete with you in the court of public opinion. If the corporate media had their way, they would not have wanted any individual reporter to be able to report any of the facts on COVID unless it was pre-approved by them and charts spun in a way so that it sounded like the pandemic was worse than it was. So we really are hitting the jackpot with Elon Musk taking over Twitter, if for no other reason than all of the hysteria surrounding it gives us a lot of cringe post material. So I hope you enjoyed this look at this article with S.E. Cupp on the New York Daily News. Once again, I will try to link that wherever this gets posted. And that's all for me today. So thanks for sticking around for this bonus episode. We will be back at it soon. And again, if you want to like and comment and share, subscribe, all that good stuff, we really appreciate it. We'll see you on the next one.